Okay guys, I'm here to talk about Anakin Skywalker. Not that Anakin Skywalker, this Anakin Skywalker. The real Anakin Skywalker. From the prequels. So, let's get into this. This is but the first episode of the character depth of just characters that I really loved. Starting off with my favourite Star Wars character, Anakin Skywalker. Now, for a lot of people, a lot of fans, they think that the prequel trilogy Anakin was a tarnished character. I don't think that is true, and here's why. First up, I think Anakin's characterization in the prequels is actually well done. It's completely different from what a lot of people thought it would be, and I think that's the problem with a lot of people. Anakin, the prequel trilogy version of him, is very similar to The Last Jedi, where everybody had this viewpoint, and Lucas and Rian Johnson went, yeah, no, we're going to completely twist it and change it around. So I understand why people hate it, but unfortunately not a lot of people are like, oh, you know what, let's look at it from a different perspective, which is something that the Star Wars films actually say, from a different perspective, it's this and that. So it's quite strange that a lot of fans and even watchers of Star Wars don't actually understand that, which is very strange to me, because I think Anakin Skywalker from the prequel trilogy alone is a very powerful, divisive, yet multifaceted character in all of cinema. Here is why. Now, first up, Anakin is an emotionally unstable man who just wanted respect and wanted to be loved, which he never got. Let's be honest. In number 2 and 3, he never really got that, right? But let's go to episode 1, because I want to definitely touch on things in episode 1. So, episode 1, we see that he is a slave. He's a slave. He's been bought. His mother's been bought. He lives there, but he lives to work for other people. He works at Watto's shop where he learns about robots and stuff. He's force sensitive, so things like taking and rebuilding, well, not fully rebuilding, because we find out in episode 1 that he found an old droid and he's kind of rebuilding from there, so he didn't really build the droid from start to finish, did he? But we see that he's very good with electronics, he's very good at creating things and all that, and it's rather interesting that a 10-year-old boy can actually do this. Of course, later on we find out he's force sensitive, and he could be very much be the chosen one, which is always interesting. So he can able to do all this, and I like that. I really do. He's in a situation where we learn why he can pod race and why he's really good with electronics and stuff, because he's been sold. He's basically been sold there. He's like, you've got to be here, you got to work here, you better do a good job because you're a slave. With that viewpoint, it makes sense of why he can do all this. But then, one characterization people don't get, that really complain about, which is, I think, is the dumbest fucking thing ever, is how he acts. In episode 1, he's a 10-year-old acting like a 10-year-old because he's a 10-year-old, okay? People say, oh, I'll try spinning it, it's a neat trick, or are you an angel? And it's like, these aren't bad lines because it's what a 10-year-old would say. I mean, to be truthful, I think Anakin in episode 1 is a very sophisticated 10-year-old. I've met a lot of 10-year-olds that have said stupid as shit. I've met a lot of 20-year-olds that say stupid as shit. But on that, though, Anakin is a child, and he's saying things that a child would say. Another thing is him and Padme. Now, Anakin and Padme, I think the difference is 4 to 5 years, which isn't too bad. I mean, first up, we live in the real world. There are crazier things, like 30 plus years. And, everybody complaining about the relationship between the age difference. I mean, let's look at the OT trilogy. Leia and Han, there was, a 10, 11 year difference there? Okay. Just putting it out there. So let's look at the character. When he's a 10-year-old character who's force sensitive, and he's very compassionate for others. How do we see this? We see this in episode 1 when he helps out Padme and Qui-Gon and even Jar Jar. He goes, oh, I can help you. And he even says that you can take you to the house. Why? Because he really likes to help people. Plus, I'm sure as soon as he saw the lightsaber, he's like, okay, you can get me out of here. I'm pretty certain that was something that ran through his head. And then later on you find out that he's force sensitive and stuff. You can't help but feel like, my God, this is a really interesting guy. He's stuck in a rut. He's stuck from the Hutt, he's stuck on Tatooine, he's stuck in Mos Eisley, he's stuck here as a slave. And then when these people come around that are like, oh, you were nice to us, well, guess what, we can help you. He gets that. Of course, it's a very one-sided because he's the chosen one, and you can't help but feel like Qui-Gon's got a bit of a, okay, I need him sort of mentality going on, which goes to show you even Qui-Gon, as powerful and wisdomful as he was, still had those kinks in him. But I always found it interesting because he's 10 years old. He's ran amok with his emotions, right? His emotions are there from day one. We see that. We see that he's a very emotional person. He's got compassion for others. He lets his emotions come out and stuff like that. When he's sad, he shows it. When he doesn't want to leave, he shows it. When he's leaving from his mother, he runs back to her because he doesn't want this. You know, a child leaving a mother, he doesn't want that. But that's because he's grown up with these emotions and they do overpower him. Now, imagine being a 10-year-old. Being a slave, 10-year-old, going through all the slave stuff and then being saved. You can be saved. But only you, not your mother. Not only that, but you've grown up in a world where your emotions run amok in a way. Now, imagine that as a 10-year-old, you do all this, you do all that, but you become into a society of the Jedi, a religion, who start to control you. Now, Anakin, from episode 1, we find out, is too old to be taken over by the Jedi. He can't be indoctrinated. We see this. He cannot be at all indoctrinated by the Jedi because he is that old. He has control of himself. But he has to, as he grows older, he has to control himself to be someone he isn't. He has to stay in line with what he's learned. But not only that, but he's being taught by people that were indoctrinated as children, so they don't even know what they're doing in a way. He is a child that is completely different to what a normal Jedi would be when they're in training, that everything's going to be different. You know, so many different signals are going to come in here. And this is all from all of this is in the prequel trilogy, I'd like to point out. Because in episode 1, we find out that not even Obi-Wan Kenobi, he wasn't ready to take Anakin on. He did this because of his dying master's wish. He wasn't ready. He wasn't ready for a lot of things throughout the movie, but he was definitely not ready to be the master of Anakin. And we even see this in episode 2 when Anakin talks back to him and says, no, hang on. We can do better, you know. He doesn't follow the same dogma as the Jedi, which is why they don't trust him and he doesn't trust him, because he wasn't indoctrinated. But on that, not being indoctrinated means things like you got to control yourself. He can't. And this kind of brings up the whole 10-year-old Anakin Skywalker. I think 10-year-old is perfect. Why? I'll tell you in a sec, but everybody keeps saying this. He should have been 14, 15, or even 16. That is a terrible decision and would have made the film series make less sense. Why? If he became a Jedi at the age of, say, 14 to 16, say 15, he would have stayed for a couple years, learned to be a Jedi, and then left. Why? Because at that age, he wouldn't have had much of an anchor. Right? If he's been a slave for that long and his family's like, oh, you can finally get, you know, someone's like, oh, you're 15 years old, you can be there, you can be free. He's going to take that. As a kid who wants to see, as a 10-year-old, he wants that, but he isn't strong enough to get there. As a 15-year-old, he feels like he can get there, and then if you have an opportunity, such as he gets in episode 1, at the age of 15, he's going to use that. Which is fair enough, but he would have been like, you know what, I'm going to go and train for the Jedi for a bit, and then left. He would have grown older. He would have been 25 by the attack of in Attack of the Clones, and by that time he probably would have left the council. He's too old to be indoctrinated at that age, even more so than the 10-year-old version of him. And he's old enough to see the flaws of the Jedi, and he would, instead of kind of dealing with it, he would have been like, no, fuck it, I'm out of here. And to be truthful, that would have made the story iffier for me. Because him falling has something to do with the fact that the Jedi never respected him, and really an outside opinion was the way to go. But if he's too old, then there's that logic of, why didn't he just leave? He could have just left. He's old enough to leave. He let him go. And they even touched up on this in a very good Obi-Wan Anakin comic book, which I suggest you read, where he feels like he's going to leave the Order. Now, in this moment, if he was older, he would have left the Order. This is why I bring that up. If he was the age everybody says he should have been, 15, 16, maybe older, he would have left the Council, he would have left the Jedi Order, and then none of that would have happened. That's the downside of it all. And you could probably write a story, don't get me wrong, you could have written a story that kind of bridges that and makes him come back, but that's a bit too much for a film. It would be good for a TV show, but not a 2.5 hour film, or even less. So, yeah. Then we get into Padme. Padme was the first woman there that believed in him in episode 1. She was there when he was taken with Qui-Gon. When he gets taken, she was there to comfort him. But not only that, but he helped save her planet. He was one of the helpers that saved the planet and actually helped them bring them together. That's a big thing. And either a relationship or a good friendship's going to come out of that, because they were, both of them, Padme and Anakin, were there for the biggest moments of their lives at that point in time, even if not ever. Something's going to come out of that. And it's love for him and even for her, which makes sense at a young age when somebody just goes through all this emotional drama, they help each other. You know, Anakin took them in. He says, no, I'll help you. I'll race for you. I'll help you out. I can help you. It's just, there's so much there so much of a perspective that they join together. You can't help but go, my God, he's doing the best he can. Except as he gets older and he's got the feelings of love and all that, especially when he has to look after her, he can't act on him. He's not supposed to. Which is why when things like, oh, I don't like sand coming up, I think is brilliant as a brilliant scene, because it shows. It's an awkward scene. It shows because he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to flirt. He doesn't know how to talk to her. He has no idea what he's doing, and that's why it comes off as cringy, because it's supposed to. That's the point. He is an emotionally unstable man who has no idea what he's doing most of the time. All he's been taught is to fight and be the chosen one, basically. And that must be a hard thing. He's looked up to by hundreds of Jedi and is pressured to live up to that prophecy. But he doesn't want that. He's got so many emotional bearings are weighted on him. As soon as he leaves to train with Qui-Gon, so many emotional things just pile up on him that he becomes that multifaceted character that I love. Don't get me wrong, I can understand why people hate him. But like I said before, it's very much like, this is what we wanted him to be, and this is what we got. But what we got, I think, is far more interesting to what a lot of fans could actually think of. Although that could just be me, because when I grew up with it, I went from OT Trilogy, and like a year later, or not even, maybe not, like a few months later, Episode 1 came out. You know, if you're a Star Wars fan from the 80s, you had 15 years to think about how you wanted Anakin Skywalker to be before he turned into Vader. So you think, okay, cool. But then you got something completely different. But honestly, I was fine with it. I loved it. It really showed the craziness of the Jedi and taking people in at the age of, like, what, 2 or 3, taking them from their families and indoctrinating them at a young age. I thought that was brilliant. It's completely different to what you thought the Jedi were, and it shows that they were flawed people, and they weren't listening to what they should have been. You know, they should have let people fall in love. They should have let their emotions come out, but they should have taught them to control them. But they didn't. And if they taught Anakin and themselves to control their emotions, Anakin would not have turned into Vader. It's their own idiocy that made Vader Vader and killed off the Jedi. And I find that brilliant, you know. Anakin is more so one of those guys that just, you know, he's in the corner. Nobody really respects him. Or he's the guy he's out there. He's in the corner at times, but he's also out there helping people out. But nobody sees the emotional conflict he has, which I love. And then you got, you know, in Episode 2, there's the parts where he's like, I'm in love and stuff. And in a way, you can't help but think the lower he went, the better Padme wanted to save him. So at the start, when they're talking at Naboo, which is fleshed out even more with the deleted scenes, and I'm annoyed that they weren't added back in. But you can tell that she's like, we can't do this. This is, you know, and he's like, we could keep it a secret. I can't live my life like that. But then over time, so much bad things happen to Anakin, losing his mother, Obi-Wan being taken, all this just political play coming in. I can't help but feel like Padme was like, no, I need to save him, because she can see that he's falling. She's his anchor. He knows it, she knows it, and then at the end of Episode 2, we see that that's it, that's true, even though his emotions are stronger for her than anything the Jedi taught him, which makes sense, because Obi-Wan was not the sort of master that should have taught him, and the Jedi were just not anywhere near as brilliant as they should have been. So he's all like, whoa, what's going on? He has to save Padme and stuff, and we see that in Episode 2. And then you get to Episode 3, which is years later. He's definitely matured as a character. You know, he's, I think, 23, 24 in that. And he has matured. He's still a bit childish in terms, but, I mean, let's be honest here. That's what happens. If you're emotionally unstable, you're not going to be spewing out Shakespeare, are you? You're not. At all. And to be truthful, I've always understood him as being someone that has no emotion for anyone. Throughout the films, I've understood that I really felt like as a character, he's really pulled himself back a bit, so he doesn't respect other people, because he's like, he can't show emotion, but he can't balance that out. He can't balance the way he shows that emotion, which is why I feel like a lot of times he's a very flat person when he talks to people, because he doesn't want to let his emotions out, because his emotions are very strong with him, because they explode and push forward for other things and just come back in. And to me, that's a very autistic viewpoint. Now, I'm autistic myself, which is why I've always, when I see stuff like that, I can't help but wonder that, I'm not saying Anakin is autistic, but he does show signs of it, you know. His emotions are basically hitting him like a freight train. There are moments where he can't help but go, he can't control his emotions and he doesn't want to let it out. He's very flat in times because he wants to be. He can't he can't extend himself to other people as easily, and he can understand robots and fix robots and starships more so than he can understand and fix people, which I've always found interesting about him. Anakin's also a character that just says what's on his mind. He doesn't really think much at times. It's very, again, autistic-wise, where it's like, no, this is outrageous, this is unfair, and it's true. He's literally saying what he thinks instead of being like, why? He doesn't really give much context or thought to it. He just goes for it, which is another thing that I noticed, and I really like that about him. There's also an interesting thing about later on when he becomes Vader. He becomes a cyborg himself, which, he can't fix himself because he works on his own merits, which is another thing. I like it how in episode 3, he has to deal with his mistakes. Now, we all make mistakes. We have to deal with them. Some big, some small. Anakin being so young in the prequel trilogy, which some fans complain about, I think is a dumb complaint because it shows that at a young age, being obviously used and emotionally unstable and just everything else, it shows that he made those mistakes and he has to live with those mistakes. He turned to the dark side to save his wife, but, she died. He was overzealous with his fighting with Obi-Wan, which turned him into Vader. His own mistakes are what he has to deal with now. That's what made him him. Obviously, other mistakes as well, but, he didn't learn from them. He's not someone that made a mistake and learned from it as much as you'd think. He's someone that made a mistake and went, you know what? I'm better than that. I can, whatever. It's a mistake, whatever. But he doesn't learn from that. He just goes, whatever, and then bam, right back into it. And that's the interesting part about Anakin to me, is that he's someone who's lost. He's lost, and that's why I find his redemption in episode 6 so powerful. He's lost everything. He lost his family, he lost his friends, he lost his wife, even in a way lost his children. Yet at the end, he understands, in a similar situation via poetry, that he can make a better decision. Anakin died in Palpatine's office, and Anakin was resurrected within Palpatine's fighting, I guess, in, say, office on the Death Star. And that's fantastic poetry, And it makes it interesting because he thought he lost everything. That was one of the reasons why he turned to the dark side, to save his wife, to save his child. Nope, they're dead when he turns into Vader. He's lost everything. And then Luke comes along, he finds out Luke's his child, and he's like, I haven't lost everything. Just to imagine that scene we found out. I mean, I know we've seen it in the comics, but just to imagine it on a broader scale of, like, he's lost everything and now he hasn't. Anakin Skywalker came to life when he found out he had a child, and that's brilliant. He had no one there. He had his wife, that was his anchor. She died, he's got no other anchor. His son comes along, and that's now another anchor, because his son, hearing all about his father from the Clone Wars and being a Jedi Knight from Obi-Wan, he's like, I want to bring him back from that depth, and I love that. That's why, to me, Anakin is a fantastic character. And that's obviously going from episode 1 to 6. But episode 1, 2, and 3 really has that depth that makes me go, it's brilliant. It's fantastic and brilliant to how he's been used and just controlled. And nobody's there to respect him, He's a very unstable person that everyone's just like... I find that interesting because he's an unstable person and everyone just looks at him and goes, look, control yourself. They don't sit him down and try to talk about it and let him... control him, try to help him. They're just like, no, you're a Jedi, control yourself. They use that as an excuse. You're a Jedi, you should not be like this. But considering he wasn't indoctrinated beforehand, there's just so much that happens that I just love. I know this is a lot of me just talking, but there's a lot to talk about Anakin, and I think I've got a firm grasp of what I was talking about there. So, that's Aussie Viking out. If I can do another one that's more in-depth and shorter, I'm totally going to do that. But yeah, Aussie Viking out. See you in Valhalla. Bye.